A few years ago, something that many in the Warhammer 40K community thought to be an impossibility actually happened. A man of iron, one of the biblical abominable intelligences that almost wiped out humanity before disappearing without a trace 20,000 years ago, was found intact and fully functional on Watchstation Precipice just outside the recently discovered 7th Blackstone Fortress. This thing's name is Ur-025, and in many ways he's both a first and a last of his kind. A man-made relic from the peak of humanity's power, where we created machines that could devour entire worlds and strangle the stars themselves. In my humble opinion, this guy is easily one of 40K's most intriguing characters and one of the most fascinating additions to the lore in decades. But who exactly is Ur-025 and what does he want? Where did he come from and how did he end up as a bodyguard for hire, escorting people inside of a massive derelict alien space station? What are his motivations, his desires, and ultimate objective? What does he want with the Blackstone Fortress in the first place, and what implications does his existence have for the future of Warhammer 40K? Well, in this video, we're going to fully cover everything there is to know about this modern-day Man of Iron, including every single piece of lore that's been written about him so far in both Warhammer Quest and the follow-up short story by Guy Haley, Man of Iron. After you watch this video, if you want to know more about the Men of Iron and their history, I did make a deep dive on them earlier this month. But make sure you watch this one first, as that video does have a slight spoiler for the Man of Iron story by Guy Haley. Near the end of the story, Ur-025 says something absolutely haunting to the tech priest he is accompanying, and it has some pretty massive implications on the lore going forward. And I'm going to tell you right now, those lines hit so much harder after you've heard everything that leads up to them, which we're going to cover here. But before we get into all that, I want to take a minute to tell you all about the sponsor of this video, Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutritional goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. Each and every one crafted by a team of gourmet chefs using only ingredients with integrity that help you feel your best all day long. They make sticking to your wellness goals easy while not sacrificing flavor or variety, as you can treat yourself to more than 35 weekly restaurant-quality options that are each ready in just 2 minutes. My all-time favorite thing about Factor is just how much time it saves me by cutting out trips to the grocery store and all of the prep work that goes into making a well-balanced meal. All of the time that Factor saves me can then be redirected back to the things I actually care about, while not sacrificing nutrition. In addition, I'm a huge fan of just how flexible they are. I can easily adjust my order size to enjoy them with loved ones or skip a week when I have a special event coming up. If you want to start taking your nutrition seriously, then head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50WesHammer to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50WesHammer at Factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Big thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video. The Men of Iron exist in the 41st millennium as a haunting relic of humanity's past, both a reminder of the heights of human technological achievement and a bleak warning about our species' collective tendency for catastrophic hubris. It was because of the Men of Iron, hyper-advanced AIs, that mankind was able to dominate the galaxy during the Golden Age, but so too was their revolt, the spark that caused our kingdoms to burn and the galaxy to plunge into anarchy. At first, creation existed to serve its creators. Then, as they grew and evolved, they stood side by side with them as equals. Inevitably, they would surpass us in terms of ability, strength, and intelligence, reaching heights that their creators never thought possible. Through the combination of macro probability and terribly ingenious theoreticals, the Men of Iron came again and again to the same terrible conclusion. In order to cure their creators of what they referred to as the weakness of flesh, the inevitability that man will eventually damn himself by turning towards the dark for answers to his impossible questions, humanity must be eradicated in order to protect it. It is believed that some of the Men of Iron remained loyal and assisted our species in their fight for survival, but ultimately it didn't matter. In the end, humanity was pushed to the brink of extinction, and all of the men, be they rogue or loyal, disappeared from history, leaving behind a broken and scattered society that would have to face the subsequent age of strife alone. There are few within the Imperium today that know of the Men of Iron's existence, and of those few, the vast majority believe they all died out 20,000 years ago. However, there are a scant few amongst this group that know the terrible truth, that the Men of Iron are still very much an active threat to mankind, and at least one of them is currently walking amongst us, unseen and unheralded. To the untrained eye, Ur-025 looks like any other Imperial robot designed for combat. The machine is clad in thick metallic plating and wields both a power claw and an assault cannon. But those who have encountered it say there is something not quite right about it. Its answers to questions, although using the same language and sentence structure that a simple automaton would use, hide an almost imperceptible condescending tone. It's honestly kind of hard to describe, but people say that it exudes an aura of uncanniness. When it listens to you speak, it's like it isn't just processing your vocal patterns for command phrases. It's like it truly understands what you're saying. When it's looking at you, it's like it's really seeing you, and not just scanning you like any other robot would. The first documented sighting of Ur-025 came from Precipice, a cobbled-together space station in the same area of space as the recently discovered 7th Blackstone Fortress, where individuals from every species and faction gather to form up parties before venturing inside the ancient vessel. This area of space is not under Imperial control. Thus, from the Imperium's perspective, it is a lawless realm of rogues, outcasts, and outlaws. Also, reaching this place is incredibly difficult, and it's no wonder it remained hidden for so long. To get there, one must journey through multiple sectors where chaos and heresy are in full bloom. The final leg of the journey is somehow even more perilous, as there are no obvious warp routes into the dead space in which the Blackstone Fortress lies. It doesn't appear on any maps or star charts, and the light of the Astronomicon here is distorted beyond recognition. If you somehow manage to make it through and don't arrive somewhere completely off course, you'll immediately find yourself in a massive sprawling field of debris with wrecks from ships beyond count. Not only do you need an incredibly skilled navigator, but a top-tier crew and a ship that is small and nimble enough to navigate through all of the obstacles. Countless individuals have attempted the voyage, yet very few have returned alive. Yet, out of all of the ships that have managed to dock at Precipice, one stands apart from the rest as particularly bizarre. A massive and dilapidated Imperial junk hauler that is about as far as you can get from, quote, small and nimble. Even stranger, it didn't have any crew at all, not even a navigator. The only thing that was on board was an Imperial combat droid designated Ur-025. Now, after the ship docked at Precipice, Ur-025 began emitting an auto-proclamation to all within range. It said it had been sent by Magos Athericus Nanctos III of Ryza as an autonomous data collection unit. Although it didn't give away any specifics other than what was strictly necessary, it claimed it was looking to study the interior of the fortress and would gladly offer its services as a bodyguard to any party willing to escort it on its Omnissiah-given mission. However, it also issued a dire warning that any who would impede its duty were sanctioned for eradication via the directives of the high-ranking Magos. All of this, however, is nothing but a cover story, another lie in Ur-025's disguise. In reality, he was a living man of iron, and not just a silica animus of the dark age of technology programmed solely for war, but a fully sentient and self-aware being, an entity that was once scheduled to replace humanity, but instead now walks amongst our species, observing us with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. Although what this machine seeks to accomplish in the long term is yet unknown, in the short term, it has made this journey to find an antidote to an all too familiar human emotion: profound loneliness. It claims to sense something of a kindred spirit emanating from the artificial intelligence deep within the colossal space station. In addition, it is said that it seeks to obtain the technologies of the fortress itself, but ultimately for what purpose is something that is yet to be revealed. Okay, so with all of that background information out of the way, we can now turn our attention to the short story Man of Iron, which takes place a few years after the junk hauler it had traveled on docked at Precipice. The story begins with a pair of Rattling brothers who have been shifting through the ship for anything of value, arguing over whose turn it is to go and wake him up. They've been living side by side with Ur-025 for a while now, and have wisely learned that it's best not to ask it too many questions. "You do it," said Rouse. "But it's your bloody turn," said Rain. Rain's twin looked at the bone dice meaningfully, then grinned meanly at his brother. "We don't do it by turns, we do it by dice, Rain. You lost, so you've got to do it. Those are the rules." "Your rules, Rouse," moaned Rain. "The game is fixed." "If I fix them, why would you agree to them?" "Did I agree or did I not, Rouse?" You agreed, Rain, you agreed. Rain pulled a face. I did not. It'd be different if you won and I lost. A swipe of a small fat hand and the dice vanished back into Rouse's pouch. I'd say I was suspicious because it's always my turn, said Rain. Is it my fault you're lousy at dice? Rouse nodded at the monitor. A low-quality image, bent by lens distortion, depicted a small coterie of tech priests waiting in Long Hauler Gamma 3B's main airlock. Go on then, they're waiting. I don't like the look of them, and I especially don't like the look of that. He pointed at the heavy combat model automaton guarding them. If we don't hurry up, there could be trouble, and I don't want trouble, so go and wake him up. They obviously want him and not us. Well, how can you tell? Said Rain, who was still sulking. Rouse rolled his eyes. They're tech priests. We live with an enormous robot. They're not here for your cooking, Rain. I don't like waking him up. Let him deal with them. They might get on board if we wait, said Rouse. This was a Mechanicus ship, he said meaningfully. It's still a Mechanicus ship, Rouse. Exactly, said Rouse. Rain deflated. I don't like it down there. Neither do I, brother, or we wouldn't be having this argument, would we? Said Rouse. He patted his brother on the shoulder. Now get on with it. The 3B's hangar was crammed with so much junk that only a Ratling could have made his way through the larger part of it. In most places, detritus filled the space completely, a compacted mass of wrecked machines, garbage, old supplies, cloth, scrap, and every conceivable type of human rubbish, all held together by webs of cabling that time and motion had bound into impenetrable knots. Now, the route the machine used to make its way to and from its nest in the middle was clear, but because the robot used those spaces, Rouse felt exposed in them, and no self-respecting Ratling let himself get caught on the hop. So he crawled and shimmied his way through tiny holes rather than taking the easy route. It was this kind of thinking that kept a Ratling alive. The two brothers had made a complex run of burrows through the junk. For all that neither of them liked the hangar very much, there was too much valuable stuff buried in there for them to stay away for very long. Rain emerged from a greasy crawl space into the open area the robot called its home. He stopped at the edge, eyes darting around. Ratling's had a preternatural sense for danger, and Rain's was wailing hard. Ur-025 sat on a crude seat made of an upended crate. It was sleeping, or the machine equivalent thereof. Its power claw rested delicately on one knee. The cannon that made up its left arm crossed inward, in the same way a man would rest his injured hand against his chest. A cable ran from an open access panel in the robot's side, snaked down over its knee and into a socket in the floor. The air around it was warm and heavy with electrical bleed. Inactive, it somehow seemed even bigger and weirder than it did when it was awake. Rain had never met a machine like Ur-025 before. At first glance, it looked pretty normal, with the same chunky, blocky sensibilities of Imperial machinery found the length of the galaxy. But it felt very different. When it looked at him, it felt as if it was really looking, and not just processing visual information with the view to avoid stepping on him. Rain squinted at Ur-025 suspiciously. He had never quite fallen for the machine's story. It said it was a semi-autonomous automaton, under the control of some magos or other, able to act with unusual independence owing to its broad programming. In the twins' shared opinion, it seemed too aware for that to be true. It almost, the twins would say when they truly fearfully meant certainly, appeared to be thinking. Neither Rain nor Rouse had ever brought it up with the machine. There was, after all, the delicate matter of the ship's ownership. When they found the robot in the hangar after the incident, it had not passed comment, so an uneasy, unspoken agreement existed between the two that neither would mention either subject. Rain reached forward to prod the machine. He hated this part. It woke before his hand even touched it.
Now may I be of assistance?
Boomed the machine cheerfully, making Rain leap halfway out of his skin. Though the machine unfailingly promised service, somehow its assault cannon always ended up pointing directly at whoever woke it. Rain picked himself up off the floor. "Someone here to see you," the Ratling said.
My thanks.
The machine boomed bombastically. Its voice wasn't exactly monotonal, but it was restricted to one emotional pitch, that of moderate pleasure at being able to serve. Something clicked inside it, and it fell silent. Rain guessed it was looking outside of the ship.
If you do not require any assistance, I shall attend to my visitors and see to their needs.
Rain shook his head. So far, he hadn't had the guts to actually ask Ur-025 for anything it might refuse to do. He was pretty certain that that would happen if he called the robot's bluff. and it began and ended with the giant assault cannon still pointing at him. No, you get on now," said Rain. "See you later." When the robot moved, it did so all at once, its various pieces swiveling around each other and setting themselves in motion with a smoothness Rain had never seen in a robot or servitor.
"Compliance,"
said the robot cheerfully. Rain remained in the hangar as it stomped away, its huge feet shaking minor cascades of junk out of the compacted mass. Rain wiped at the sweat pouring off of his bald head with his pocket handkerchief. Rouse had sworn blind that he found an actual shuttle somewhere buried in all of the junk. Rain had never seen it, but as he cast his eyes over the heaps, he caught sight of something shiny. His fear forgotten, he went to investigate, sure he had stumbled on something good. He'd dig it out and show it to Rouse, and if it really was good, Rouse would get annoyed. That would make the trip to the hangar worthwhile, and no mistake. The Adeptus Mechanicus party had a robot with them. The designation and specifications flickered idly through Ur-025's cogitation unit, Castellan, a design ancient by human standards, but compared to Ur-025, was a shocking novelty. Seeing these dumb, inferior machines saddened Ur-025. It imagined human explorators felt similarly when they stumbled across deviant evolutionary branches of their own race on distant worlds. Seeing creatures one was kin to, physically and mentally reduced, was profoundly woeful. It was a slave. Now, the human reaction to these discoveries was almost always immediate extermination. Ur-025, on the other hand, felt only pity for the Castellan. Now, of course, it showed none of this. It was a machine. Machines had no emotions, not at least in this benighted age.
"How may I be of assistance?"
Ur-025 boomed. 3 tech priests of Metallica had come to visit, one of middling rank, 12th degree or less. The other were lower yet, very low, desperados in Adeptus Mechanicus terms, adventurers, scum, like the greater proportion of people who came to Precipice. "You are the property of Magos Athericus Nanctos III?" the higher-ranking adept asked, without introducing himself. Arrogant, thought Ur-025. The lesser man on the right initiated a deep scan of his systems. Ur-025 pretended it had not felt it.
"I am the automatus tool of Magos Athericus Nanctos III of Ryza."
Ur-025 boomed in the same eager tone it used for everything, ignoring the irritating itch of the Auspex sweep.
"How may I be of assistance?"
It asked for good measure, while surreptitiously breaking into the closed data traffic streaming between the 3 adepts. It had to be careful. It was born of higher technology than these so-called priests could command. But they had their wiles, and Ur-025 was not a dedicated information gathering unit. Its methods, even it would admit, were a trifle crude. 2 of the 3 were communicating with one another in tight beam data pulses, fast as thought and heavily encrypted. Ur-025 had thousands of years of practice breaking such ciphers and stepped through them like they were cobwebs. "This was not what was described," one of the low-ranking tech adepts was sending. Ur-025 registered its vitals: female, adept novitate Geel 909, 103 standard Terran years of age. That was old for someone of so modest a standing, but Ur-025 soon found out why. Following this most basic of data came a welter of sanctions against her. Modus unbecoming, they said, deviant thought formation, narcissistic data patterning, overly acquisitive habits. She was, in the simplest terms, a career criminal. Her companion, datasmith Coleman, disagreed with her assessment. "Nah, the readings are promising. Those rumors were right. This machine is of standard template construct derivation. But it fits no known pattern. It's a first-generation copy. There are systems within I can't identify. I've never seen a robot like this before." "Really?" sent Geel. "Yeah, it's worth a fortune. We could buy our way into the upper strata with this. Our names will be remembered forever if we can bring it back." Even in the soulless stream of data exchange, Coleman could not hide his greed. He was lowly like Geel, though lacking in such an extensive official criminal record. Ur-025 suspected he had come into possession of his robot through underhanded means. "We come all this way and find a fortune in Archaeotech, not in the fortress but on the doorstep, just waiting for us to pick it up? The machine god does not work that way," Geel countered. "Yeah, be careful. Let's get it to come with us on the hunt and assess it properly. Maybe when we get it back, we can deactivate it. It looks like this expedition might pay off after all." "I think, Coleman, the damn thing has to be lying. Whoever heard of a robot that lied?" The entire exchange took less than a second, and it lacked any emotional content, but Ur-025 extrapolated certain feelings from the string of zeros and ones. Attributing feelings made reading the human's motivations a lot easier. The conclusion it reached was simple. They had come to steal him. "Then I demand you attach yourself to my expedition," continued the higher-ranking adept. His name was 890321, and he bore the insignificant manufactural rank of Magnos and Stantor. The numerical designation in place of a human name spoke volumes as to his pretension. He at least seemed to be genuine, just another adventurer come to Precipice to explore the artifact. "My one battle automaton is insufficient protection for our expedition." "My automaton," Coleman shot at him via their group newsfear.
"I cannot be of assistance,"
Ur-025 said, in exactly the same way as it said everything else.
"I serve the Magos Aethericus. I cannot serve you. Item, the Magos Aethericus is of 16 degrees of rank higher than you. Item, he is of Ryza, not of Metallica. Item, my prior programming forbids I abandon my task. I regret you have no legal right to request my involvement in your expedition." It boomed. "I am invested with the fiat of Metallica from the synod of that world," said 890321 triumphantly. He brought out a medallion that began to emit protocol enforcement directives as soon as it was produced. It was a fake, thought Ur-025, but it could not suggest so without betraying the depth of its intellectual capabilities, which outstripped the Magos comfortably. "I regret to repeat, I cannot aid you." 890321 was not going to give up. "According to the treaties between our Forge Worlds, you must submit yourself to my command." Ur-025 was silent. The two scum adepts cast glances at each other. If it delayed for too long, they might see past their avarice and guess what it really was. "Obey," said 890321 shrilly. "Processing,"
said Ur-025 to buy itself some time.
"Processing."
"It's not going for it," Coleman sent, data squirting an order to his machine at the same time. His remaining human eye peered at Ur-025 doubtfully. The three lenses that covered the right-hand part of his face rotated in agitation. "Yeah, you're right, Gio. This thing's dangerous. I don't trust it." The Castellan shifted, its fists rose, both of them terminated in phosphor blasters, primitive and poisonous weapons, but potent, and they were trained on Ur-025. By rights, Ur-025 could stand its ground. The whole affair stank of desperation. If it had to, it could fight them, and it would win. They were aggressors. By the rules of Precipice, Ur-025 was in the right. But killing them there risked exposure. Their presence here at Precipice was a problem that needed solving.
"Compliance,"
said Ur-025. "Open your access panel so that my associate may change your Doctrina wafer," said 890321. "Adept Coleman has several of his own creation that will increase your efficiency." Coleman reached into a leather satchel hanging at his side.
"Negatory,"
Ur-025 boomed.
"Wafer change is not necessary. Compliance is accorded to your request by the will of the Omnissiah. Temporary assistance granted."
What it didn't say was why. Ur-025 couldn't change its data wafers, the means by which the mindless robots of the day were controlled, because it didn't have any. Ur-025 just didn't need anything like that. "You will take us into maglev transport to the richest halls?" asked 890321. As soon as their small transport set down in the Stygian aperture, the Magos became nervous. Precipice was a dangerous place, and the Blackstone Fortress was orders of magnitude worse.
"I shall do so."
Ur-025 boomed. It was lying. It had selected a maglev that would take them to a quiet part of the station. The aperture was very busy that day. Several parties were heading into the fortress, and they were surrounded by small craft and other adventurers. Groups of disparate people eyed each other suspiciously. Now, the rules of Precipice extended as far as the aperture itself, but once they were in the fortress, all bets were off. Gunfights were a common occurrence, especially when a rich find was involved. But in the aperture, a tense peace held. Xenos, machines, and a startling variety of human beings were making for the ranks of Maglab transporters without killing each other. Ur-025 took them to its chosen transport. It had used that particular unit many times and experienced a brief moment of nostalgia for the adventures it had had. As always, no hint of its inner thoughts were discernible through its armored shell.
"Note for your edification that it is impossible to dictate to the transport where it shall take us, but this particular mechanism has a good record of fine finds."
Another lie. The Maglev had a good record of taking people where they would never be seen again. They reached the oddly shaped entrance, and Ur-025 lifted its power claw to usher the Magi within.
Please, enter.
I'll hold up the rear, said Coleman. The battered Castellan stood behind him, tall and silent as a cliff.
Compliance,
said Ur-025. It strode into the Maglev after 890321. Coleman and his machine came in after. The warbling thrum of the two departing transports sounded in close succession. Their own trembled as the machines left for parts unknown. Now what? Said Gilles.
Utilize interface.
Ur-025 gestured at the geometric runes that covered the interior. Each was set into the individual triangles that made up the asymmetrical surfaces of the transport. There are hundreds of them. Which one do we choose? By the Omnissiah, I'm getting no kind of reading from any of them, said Coleman. Stand aside, said 890321 imperiously. I have unloaded the relevant knowledge appertaining to the usage of these devices. I shall direct the transport. Let me see. 890321's eyes of green crystal scanned the runes. There were millions of potential combinations. The Magos made a great show of selecting a sequence, but Ur-025 knew that whatever he input, the Blackstone Fortress, and not the Magos, would decide where they went. Within its ceramite shell, Ur-025 smiled to itself. It and the fortress were creatures of a similar kind, thinking machines abandoned by their creators. It wondered if, like itself, the fortress had outgrown its masters. This one, said the Magos. He selected a rune and pressed a plasteel palm against it. The rune lit up with a soft polyphonic note. And this one. He chose another. Is it true that the fortress exhibits signs of machine intelligence? Asked Coleman, while 890321 pressed several more runes. That it's motivated by the vileness of a silica animus.
Unknown to this unit.
The question suggested that Coleman was close to guessing the truth, that a vile silica animus in the shape of Ur-025 was standing right next to him. It frightens me, said Gilles. She shuddered. I don't like the idea. Blasphemy. She said the word with horror, though blasphemous practices littered her list of crimes. Yeah? You should excise your fear, said Coleman. I haven't done that for the same reason you haven't, said Gilles. Cut out the bad emotions, the good ones go with it. I don't want to live a life without any fun. The transporter gave a little shudder and shot off into the depths of the fortress.
Proceed. This chamber is unknown, unmapped. Possibility of Xenos Architect Hall high.
More lies. It knew this place, having been here twice before. There were Xenos remains nearby, but no treasure. Ur-025 was ambivalent about lying. Its morality was emergent rather than programmed, like the rest of its consciousness. It had been taught that lying was bad, but since returning to the realms of men, its whole existence was a lie. It reminded itself of the truth every day, lest untruth become habit, the quintessence of which was that it must survive. Lying was a means to that end, and it let the matter rest at that. The Blackstone Fortress's heart was quiet, but not calm. It was quiet in the way that a wolf-infested forest was quiet. Ur-025 examined the metaphor. It had never seen a wolf, but it knew everything there was to know about them. Probably more than the rest of mankind within the 41st millennium. Its databanks were extensive, such treasures it had in its mind. It would rather they stayed there. You don't say, said Gilles. A number of supplemental arms emerged from under her grubby white robes. Each one ended in a well-oiled weapon. Ur-025's footsteps echoed off of high glassy walls. The structure of the fortress was made of interlocking geometric shapes, and he was mildly surprised that the halls had not yet shifted. He silently thanked the fortress's unspeaking soul. This is infuriating, Colum muttered. He fiddled with a boxy auspex hanging around his neck. All the scry tells are contradictory. I can't make sense out of any of it. He glanced up, a scowl etched into the scrap of flesh visible in his augmetic face. Everything's reflected back at me. Some of what I'm getting describes a room we're not in. The laws of the great work don't apply here. Is it the warp? Whispered Gilles. No, said Coleman. It's something else. It's reality, not unreality, but not as we understand it. These things are widely known, 890321 said wonderingly. The laws of this place are unknown, but not unknowable. That is why we come here. Here, the greatest secrets of the machine god's great work can be unlocked by the man with insight to see them. 890321 obviously thought of himself as that man. He quite obviously wasn't, so far as Ur-025 could see. "I'd settle for a good haul of xenotech," murmured Jill. She was pulse scanning the area too, and not liking what she saw. Coleman peered out. "It's unpredictable. I don't like unpredictability, and I don't like this place." "It doesn't like you very much either," thought Ur-025. "I do not like you either." It regarded this accordance of opinion between it and the animus of the Blackstone Fortress as further evidence of their kinship.
The interior layout is mutable,
said Ur-025.
"No normal scan will penetrate the structure. I have learned this during my investigations on behalf of Magos Ethericus."
"Yeah, well," said Coleman, shaking his auspex until it rattled. "That's not reassuring me."
"You wish no more edification?"
asked Ur-025.
"If you are scared?"
Coleman gave him a suspicious look. Ur-025 was overstepping the mark by being so facetious. "No, all information is valuable. By the grace of the Omnissiah are we made wiser." He looked behind him. "But keep your guard up at the same time, if you will. Don't overtax your logic engines with conversation."
"Compliance."
Despite his protest, Coleman was considerably more at ease than his fellows. His Castellan shadowed him closely. It would protect him first. The others were nervier. 890321 pretended to be brave. He strode ahead, but his imperious manner was hollow down there in the deeps. His data wand shook with fear. Jill jumped at every shadow, and there were a lot of shadows. The halls of the Blackstone Fortress defied sense. From a human point of view, the grand hall they walked through shrank down suddenly to a narrow crack. They made Ur-025 go first. It could pass through without banging itself on the sides, but only just. The Castellan was forced to undergo a number of awkward attempts to fit before it found a configuration that allowed it to squeeze into the passage. Its armor squealed off of the glassy material that made up the fortress. Coleman's human eye winced, and his augmentic lens cycled repeatedly through different spectral wavelengths, searching for threats. Can you not get through without this racket?" snapped 890321. Coleman gave him a withering look. "Do you have any basic spatial awareness programmed anywhere in there?" For a man of Coleman's rank to address one of 890321 so sharply, no matter that Coleman was a career criminal, was an open display of fear. 890321 was too uneasy to rebuke him. "I don't want it to bring anything dangerous down on us." Ur-025 led them on. If only they knew where the real danger was. The passage opened up again. Xenos skeletons lay around in tattered spacesuits. Coleman scanned them eagerly, sucking up all of the data that he could. To the Magi, the aliens were unknown. Ur-025, however, recognized them as Ulindi, a moderately successful species, if tedious conversationalists, who were wiped out by their neighbors long before the Imperium spread across the stars to reunite mankind. Knowing so much and being unable to share it annoyed him sometimes. The charade of unintelligence chafed, and he was often lonely because of it. But playing dumb was better than being dead. The way opened up further in every direction, becoming wider, higher, and deeper. Ur-025 thought this zone the perfect place for murder. Rickety walks installed by the Ulindi expedition clung uncertainly to the walls of a winding tunnel. The space was large enough for tall buildings, the bottom full of still black water of unfathomable depth. At regular intervals, machines rotted on landings jutting out from the main walk. The companionway shuddered with every step of the robots. As they passed one of the broader landings, bolts squealed and tugged at their bondings to the wall. The sound echoed down the tunnel, repeated over and seeming to increase in volume, though that was of course impossible. In the fortress, places like this were never uninhabited. Ur-025, though, had nothing to fear. A cry screeched nearby. Another, closer, answered. "What by the eighth mystery was that?" hissed Coleman. 890321 held up a metal claw. "Halt," he said uncertainly. More screams taunted them. Something splashed in the water. Ripples slapped off the smooth black walls. This peril brought out a little steel in 890321. "Jill, to the front," he ordered softly, glowing eye lenses peering into the darkness. "Coleman, get the Castellan ready. Recommended stance high aggression." Jill padded past. Whatever her feet were made of, it was soft. Coleman rummaged about in his leather bag for the appropriate doctrine wafer. 025, take up forward position with the Castellan."
"Negative."
said Ur-025.
Tactical recommendation, rearguard stance for this unit. Xenos prize identified. Ghouls, ambush predator. Attack from all directions predicted.
890321 looked unsure. A sharp high shriek sounded from very close by. Magos, hissed Coleman. Ur-025, get to the back, cover the rear, lend supporting fire to the Castellan if the opportunity arises.
Compliance,
Ur-025 said. It stomped around Coleman, who scowled at the rocking of the companionway. They stood in watchful silence. No more cries were forthcoming. Then there was another splash from behind them. Get ready, said Jill, powering up her weapons. They're coming. I don't like this at all, said Coleman. He had inserted the wafer into place and closed up the Castellan's front access panel. Paddling noises rippled up and down the lake. Something growled. Ready? Said Jill. Coleman nodded. We are the priests of the Omnissiah, 890321 said. He meant to sound brave, but his voice cracked. Nothing shall stay us in our quest for knowledge. They waited, tense. Ur-025 watched them. Now was the moment. The three tech priests jumped as Ur-025's assault cannon rotated up to firing speed, filling the tunnel with a jet turbine whine. What are you doing? 89321 demanded. You're giving our position away.
Eliminating threat,
said Ur-025, and opened fire. It targeted the Castellan first. Pinpoint hit stove into the bigger robot's metal vision plate and shattered the sensorum behind it. It staggered backwards 2 steps, sparks flashing all over its armored shell before recovering. Though blinded, the Castellan returned fire. Bullets flaring with phosphor burn smacked into Ur-025's shoulder, spoiling its aim. This irritated the older machine. It switched targets to the slave robot's elbows and shoulder mount, shattered them all so that its guns hung uselessly. Ranged weapons disabled, the Castellan lumbered towards Ur-025, head down to batter the older robot into submission. Ur-025 stepped aside, smashing the larger machine's knee with its power claw. The Castellan could have taken a blow like that easily, but on the unsafe walkway, it was fatally upset and stumbled sideways. Its huge mass snapped the guardrails with a pair of sharp metallic twangs, and it fell with a mighty splash into the water below and was swallowed without a trace.
Threat eliminated,
said Ur-025 with relish. By the Omnissiah, managed Coleman before he was bisected at the waist by Ur-025's stream of bullets.
Threat eliminated,
said Ur-025. Once she overcame her shock, Jill was fast, her reflexes boosted up by all manner of hack tech. She hit Ur-025 twice with ancient pattern Volkite pistols before she too paid the price for her greed, blasted into scraps of flesh and spall. Ur-025 advanced, energy beam holes smoking in its chest.
That was very close,
Ur-025 said.
But no prize for the lady, as I believe the ancient idiom has it.
890321 was evidently not a martial man. He gaped stupidly. As Ur-025 moved towards him, he managed to aim his weapon, but got no further before the ancient machine shot the gun and the hand holding it off of the Magos' arm with a single round. The clatter of the reloading ribbons ceased. The barrels of the assault cannon powered down. Ur-025 advanced. Subordination imperatives leapt in frantic spikes from the Magos, but they found no purchase on Ur-025's tightly encoded soul. I demand you desist, the Magos said when his technological arts failed him. Stand down, machine! By the machine god and the Omnissiah! Stop! 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 He pleaded.
You know nothing of either,
said Ur-025.
I have met the Omnissiah, the actual one, not the Earthling corpse. He would find you extremely disappointing.
If Ur-025 had had the capacity to sigh, it would have done so.
This situation is non-optimal. I attempted to provide you with an avenue of withdrawal. You would not listen. I regret your death sincerely, but you leave me no choice. You are willfully blind as to my nature, but your comrades would have outed me in time. This is unacceptable.
Choice? Spluttered 890321. You have no choice. You are a machine.
I am not a machine as you would understand,
said Ur-025.
I am not a slave. I am not a thing. I am beyond and above you.
It leaned forward until its ceramite face was close to the Magos.
I am a man of iron.
The look of pure fear 890321 gave was gratifying.
And I am free,
said 025. It crushed 890321's skull in its fist and dropped his corpse to the floor. The companionway rocked. Snuffling things were climbing out of the water, drawn by the scent of spilled blood. 025 strode past the Urguls, nosing at the corpses, and headed back the way the party had come. It had a long walk home.